Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here this evening. We are going to be talking about getting started with your bench test preparation. It is about that time of the year where a lot of people are realizing that it is about time to get started. Several schools gave out their interviews, right? And of course, Colorado has been coming up, everything. So whether you are you've just finished applying this year and you're like, okay, and then we get started with this, bench test preparation thing, or you've been practicing for a while, whatever your situation might be, I think you'll find this workshop informative. Now, just in case you are watching in YouTube, head on over to our website, so internationallimacentral.com/workshop, if you want to participate and ask questions and whatnot. There's a chat room there where you can ask questions, and everybody in the chat room, anytime during the workshop, feel free to drop a question inside of there. Most likely, I will be able to get to the questions at the very end of the workshop, but I will be going from top to bottom in terms of sequence. So I will be happy to answer questions related to today's topics, getting started with your bench test preparation. So yeah, at any point in time, if you have any questions, just type it in our chat room. I'm gonna guess that you can see me and hear me okay. So let me see, I will get started now. So how many of you guys actually, if you have a bench test coming up, type in me in the chat room. I want to know where you guys are at. And if you're waiting for something, type waiting in the chat box. Okay, and then while you guys do that, I am going to bring up my slides and change this to presentation mode, so you won't be able to see my face for a while. Okay, so here we are. How to get started with a bench test prep practice. It's a pretty daunting task for a lot of people. There's a lot to do and prepare for, and some schools have very elaborate bench tests. Some schools don't tell you what they're going to ask until the day comes. There's a lot of angst and wonders around the bench test. So today, I'm going to show you how to get started with your bench test practice efficiently so that you can practice with purpose and improve with every preparation. This is important. It is very, very, very easy to go through lots and lots of teeth without seeing much improvement. And that is not exactly what anybody wants to do, obviously, yeah? And how inefficient and what a waste of time. So I want you to be efficient and practice with purpose. I want you to know what you are practicing for while you're practicing for it. So that is what we are going to do in today's workshop. So I want you to turn off all of your distractions while we go through this, okay? So your phone, all of your other, if you're on your computer, any other tabs that might be open, close them. You got like an hour. I promise I'll make it worth your time. So yeah, turn them off, put your phone on vibration. I am not exactly sure why you are here today, but I do know that you showed up here today even though you are very, very busy for a specific reason. You might be feeling uncertain, like you want to get started with your bench test, you think it's time, but you're just not sure how to go about it because yes, it is a very daunting task ahead, right? Or you might just feel stuck, like you've been practicing for a while, but you don't really see much progress, much improvement in your work. Or maybe you've been to a few bench tests, yet things did not work out for you just yet. And you're wondering if something about the way you've practiced is off. Or maybe you are a big go-getter and you don't want to just like barely pass the bench test, but you want to do a really good job, and you want that to lead you to having options regarding which program you are going to go to. Whatever your reason is for being here, I understand you and I fully support you. So this is me. Who am I, in case this is your first time with me or you don't know me very well? My name is Dr. Alyssa Marshall, and like you, I am an internationally trained dentist. And like many of you, I went through the application process more than once. So I went through it twice. I applied twice. So the first year, I had 2 invitations, one with and one without a bench test, and nothing worked out. Year 2, I got 9 invitations. I went to 6 out of those interviews, 9 interviews, and I got 5 acceptances. And then later in the cycle, I got one more surprise acceptance from a school that I didn't even go to their interview. And starting 2013, we've been working with candidates officially through International Dentist Central, working with their bench test skills, of course, their applications and interviews as well, but really for their bench test skills, so people could practice and really improve from the comfort of their own home. So I do know a thing or two about improving bench test skills. I did it myself, and I have seen some major transformations happen amongst the applicants who have worked with me. And I can't wait to share with you today what I have ready. So today's topic is about getting started with your practice. So we're going to talk about what you need for your home lab setup, and we will go through it pretty quickly because it's a list of things that you need to set it up. If you want the list with like links and stuff, shoot us an email and we'll actually send you the link. We have everything organized on one page in our website. So you can shoot us an email at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com and we'll send you that link. But anyway, we're going to talk about your home lab setup and then how to go about your bench test practice so you don't waste time making the same mistakes over and over again. And worst of all is making the same mistakes over and over again and not know why it has happened or like how to improve upon it, right? Okay, before we get into the meat of things though, when you think of bench test practice, is this what you think of? Or is this what you think of? Obviously, both are correct, right? But I also want to make sure that you have the right mindset, because that's kind of the basis for how you'd be approaching your practice. Mindset piece is very important. Bench test practice is less like this. It's less like a ladder that has an end and like you reach the sky. It's not that. It's less like that. And it's more like this. It's more like a never-ending case of stairs, unfortunately, right? Like, wouldn't it be great if there was some point where you're like, okay, my bench test practice is done, we're all good. But it really isn't. Even me today, when I do preps, I can still see things that I could have done better. I still take a deep breath before starting a proximal box prep, or when I'm breaking the contacts interproximally, when I do crown preps. The more you know and the more you practice, the more sharper your eyes of discernment become. And therefore, the more things you see that you can improve upon. And so it is not like, okay, I'm done, I've arrived. The more you practice, you will see more things, and it will not, you will likely not come to a place where like, okay, I'm done, I'm good. Like, just bring any bench test to me. Like, I'm good. That's not, if that has happened to you, I would seriously say show it to somebody that really knows what they're doing, and they will point out things that can be improved from this preparation for sure. And I would I would encourage you to look into your eyes of critique, because something's lacking there. And that is actually very important, because when you take your bench tests, it's all you. And what happens a lot is people will go to their benches, come back, and when I ask like, oh, how'd it go? They'll be like, oh, great. You know, a lot of people will be like, okay, yeah, I went to bench test last year and the bench test went good. And the interview went good, and I don't know why I didn't make it. You know, this is a very, very common scenario. And I'll be like, all right, well, show me a prep that you've done. And I'll take a look, and I'll be like, okay, we actually have a lot of work to do here. This is not done, and this is not as good as you think it is. Or at least in comparison to where your competitors are, because that is really what matters, right? It's not about reaching an absolute point in your preps. It is about where do you stand in relation to all of the other people, because there are only so many seats in each program. Okay, so let's talk about what you need to get started with your practice. What do you need? Compressor, turbine, and then you need a connector so that you can connect those two things together. You need a high-speed handpiece, typorant, teeth, a mounting pole, cheek cover, lights, dental instruments, and burrs. And these are like the bare essentials, yeah? I wouldn't recommend anybody practicing like towards the end of their practice without a cheek cover, because it really does make a big difference. So yeah, there are optional things like loops, right? Things like that. Those are optional. A slow speed handpiece, optional. But what you really need to have are these things. Compressor and turbine. What you see on the left-hand side is a compressor. What you see on the right-hand side is a turbine unit. You need those two things. The compressor sends air into the turbine unit, which sends air into the handpiece so that it can spin at a super high speed, yeah? Or you can get one of these. This is a portable unit that has a compressor and turbine unit, everything basically in one box. And all you have to do is plug it in to your electric outlet. They work fine. The only thing that I have found is that it is very hard on your electricity bill, like very, very hard on your electricity bill. That's the only thing. But otherwise, this is also an option. The cost is also a lot more expensive actually than buying these two things separately. So anyway, get one or the other. High-speed handpiece. Price ranges greatly, varies, right? Like $10 to like $1,000+. Now, there are so many Chinese knockoffs on the market, and they will say that they're made in Japan or Germany, and they will even have a brand name printed on it. And unfortunately, I will tell you that these really cheap handpieces have also infiltrated some US dental instrument suppliers. I've seen them being sold by some suppliers for a few $100s. So like their bottom of the line basic handpiece, like $200-300 or maybe $300-400. And it's pretty much the same as what you can get on eBay for like $20. So it's really hard to tell them apart, to be honest. And it's hard because of this. It's very difficult to make a recommendation in terms of what brand to buy, even because brands at this point with those knockoffs being made don't really mean much unless you're actually purchasing it directly from the manufacturer and like it's legitimate. Like, so a good option is actually to go through the route of repairing a older handpiece. So if you buy a broken handpiece, a broken used handpiece on eBay, usually every handpiece is going to have its own story, but it's going to have a nice casing, right? And oftentimes what's the issue is like the bearings inside the handpiece head. And then you can find a person that repairs handpieces, switch off the parts, and then you have a perfectly good handpiece that is good for you. Or another option is just buy a lot of the cheap options, just thinking whatever, like you will throw them away when they go bad, and just have lots of them. Price-wise, that's actually a great option as well. And then comes in the issue of electric handpieces, especially for people going to Colorado. I get this question a lot because they will likely be tested on an electric handpiece. In regards to especially like, oh, how can I get an electric handpiece for cheap and whatnot? You can't get an electric handpiece for cheap. You can't. They are very, very expensive still. Like, even if you go the refurbished route, it's a few $1,000s. So most people will handle an electric handpiece for the first time on their test day, unless they have contacts with a dentist that has one in their office and they don't mind letting you use that really expensive, handpiece. So yeah, if finances are not an issue for you and you want to simulate everything as closely as possible, then go for it for sure. But if it's not that, then I wouldn't worry about it too much because pretty much almost everybody handles electric handpiece for the very first time on their test day. It's not ideal, of course, but it just, it's situational. It kind of is what it is. Typorant. There's Kilgore and there's Columbia. Mostly it's that. There are a couple other brands that like a few schools use, but unless you're doing that, it's either Kilgore or Columbia. $200 to $300. If you want them new, which I highly recommend, go directly to Kilgore's or Columbia's website. Please do not buy new Typorants from eBay because they are fake, even though they say they are genuine. They are not genuine and they will not fit the real teeth from Kilgore or Columbia. So don't do that. If you're going to go the eBay route or the whatever route, make sure you just buy them used, not new. The price is going to be similar, so it's tempting, but don't do that, okay? And Kilgore and Columbia teeth are not interchangeable. Mounting pole. Get this very simple contraption is on eBay. $50 to $60 last time I checked. And yeah, this works fine for your home practice. Of course, you can get it more elaborate than that, but really like this is all you need. One thing with the mounting pole is that the most common mistake people make is mounting it too high. Mount it lower than what you think it should be. And even though I'm showing you a picture of this being mounted on a tabletop, where I recommend mounting it is actually the legs of desks, because you can change the height up and down, and you need to. Like when you're working on lower teeth, you need it mounted lower because the pole is going to be sitting at an angle heading upwards, versus when you're working on upper teeth, you need to mount it higher so that when this is parallel to the floor, you're working on teeth at the same height. Oral cavity cover. Kilgore has great ones, and it does not matter which brand Typorant you're using because it fits over it. So just get that from Kilgore. It's reasonably priced, $50 or so. I think it was like 47 if I'm not mistaken. I have seen that, like, if you just get a random oral cavity cover, it's a draw of luck, but some will not even open. Like, this is just not stretchy enough to even open the Typorant to its full opening. That's no fun. So just get it from Kilgore. This setup has a head. This is much more fancy and expensive. It's gonna set you back about $1,000 or so. And the mounting pole I showed you earlier is not sturdy enough to handle this heavy head. So you're going to need a much sturdier mounting pole. It is an option available, but most people don't do this. Lighting. We are obviously not going to get those expensive dental lights, yeah? And those expensive dental lights are really, really good lights, but I found that these little LED lamps from IKEA that are $10 work great if you have 2 or 3 of them, not if you have one. These are spotlights. They're very directional in their lighting. So if you cover it with your hand or your handpiece, it just goes completely dark, which is why you need 2 or 3 of them pointing from different directions so that you don't completely get rid of your light, but it's great. Instruments, mirror, explorer, probe, and hand cutting instruments. Hatchet, margin trimmers, mesial, and distal ones. I really like this website called mydentalusa.com, and I'm giving you like, Kilgore, Columbia, whatever, like, I'm not affiliated with any of these obviously at all. But I have found that this website is well priced and very high in quality. Hatchets and trimmers, I like. Mirror, fine, just get it on eBay. You can find something for maybe a few bucks, less than $5 you can probably find something. Hand cutting instruments, you can find them, but they are going to be very poor quality. I do not recommend that. Go to mydentalusa.com and get one there. It's really good quality, very, very comparable to the name brands, and it's made in the US and much cheaper than if you went the name brand route. So which is really the reason why I recommend it. And Explorer, don't go too cheap on that either, because the tip bends and then you can't feel stuff very well, and that's not good. Burrs, for cavities, you need 330, 245, and 56. Get those 3. For crowns, you need 556 for the occlusal of molars and premolars, 856, get 0, 1, 2, 4, and 6. For your chamfers and your interproximal reduction, 847 KR 016 for your shoulder, and your egg shaper. This is a simple setup. It's everything you need. 556 is different from a 56, okay? They're separated up for a reason. Do not just buy one or the other. You need both. Okay, starting your practice. Remember, please, this is not what you were taught in dental school. And I want to stress this because people that have practiced for a while, especially, come back and they feel like, you're practicing on plastic teeth. Like it feels like you're taking several steps back. It feels like you should know what to do and how to do it, and it should just be easy for you. But it isn't. It really is not. So you were never taught this, for one, and it's very different from how we actually see patients, for another. So this is not what you were taught. Give yourself some grace. This is a completely new skill set that you are working on right now. Okay. The most common bench test scenario. So if you have a bench test coming up, and let's say you know exactly what's going to be asked, then great. Just stick with that. Just practice those. That's fantastic. But most of the time, you'll vaguely know that it'll be something like, oh, a cavity and a crown or something like that, and maybe a restoration, if it's included or not. But you won't exactly know which tooth, whatnot. But this is the most common bench test scenario. And yes, there are schools that have much more elaborate bench tests, like a bridge prep, or like a temporization of a crown, or more than one restoration, more than 2 cavity preparations, or sometimes even endo-access opening, and all of these different possibilities. But for the most common, or online preps, but for the most common, this is it. And unless you know that, wherever you're going to is going to have more things, just focus on these. And even if you do know, cavities and crowns, if you ruin this, I don't think you have a chance, to be honest. If you make a little bit more of a mistake on, let's say, endo-access opening or temporization, more people make a lot of mistakes there. So, in terms of grading, it will even out a little bit more. But for cavities and crowns, people are really good these days, and you can't afford to not do that. But also, it takes the longest time to get better at cavities and crowns. You don't just get better overnight at these things versus temporization. If you give yourself a week and do maybe 1 or 2 a day, you'll get significantly better. So yeah, just focus on this first. Many things you might be worried about. Just looking at this, yeah? Like, what do you mean? There are so many teeth. Like, you make it sound so simple. Like, oh yeah, just a cavity, but there's so many teeth, right? So do you have to practice on all of them? And then on top of that, crowns, there are so many different types of crowns. Is it a faux gold, PFM, all ceramic? Also, what if like you're going to a specific school and you just don't know the exact guidelines for that school you're going to? And, schools just don't have these same guidelines for grading. Like, then how do you prepare? Or like, which exact birds will be given to me on the test day? Or generally, the ideal prep guidelines, it's a long list. Like, do these really need to be met like this? It's just kind of might look a little crazy. Or like, so how good does my work actually need to be to pass the bench test, right? All of these things and maybe more. If you have other worries, put in the chat room. But yeah, so many things that you might be worried about. And yeah, you're right, but I want you to focus on these things first. Principles of each prep. Clinically acceptable is more important before being ideal. Okay. Like, yes, ideal preps have a long list of criteria, but not all of them are created equal. And if you try to hit the criteria that, let's say, a prep only has because we're trying to make an ideal prep, but you slip on some criteria that are very important, because if those are not met, this preparation will not be clinically acceptable. Like, that is not a good prep. Yeah. So you have to make sure you're making your work first clinically acceptable before you focus too much on becoming ideal. Steady hands. I cannot stress this one enough. Nobody, let's say, makes a isthmus of a cavity preparation more than 1 millimeter because they want to, right? It's an easy criteria to see when it's wide. It's an easy one to try and keep, but it's a difficult one to actually keep. Like, sometimes you would just be removing your burr from the cavity and it will just nick and become wider, or when you're smoothing it, things become wider, or you're just like passing through and it just widens everything and makes it larger, right? Steady hands, if you don't have that, you won't be able to do an ideal prep, period. When you have steady hands, your hands will be able to do for you things that you want it to actually do, like leave the isthmus at 1, don't widen it. No longer becomes an issue because it's like you have better control of your hands, if that makes sense. So steady hands, something that you really need to focus on. What do you think of this prep? If your cavity preps look a little like this, we need to make it so it looks a little bit more like this to get your bench test ready. It's a long road. Honestly, it's not an overnight transition. But the left side cavities, they're big, wide. And you can see that the operator really took time to smoothen things and try to make things flow. But while doing that, the operator has made things very, 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 very wide and large. And that's not, what we want to see on a bench test. The left side is far from pass mark. The right side, at least from the outline point of view, looks pretty good. Yeah. benchtop practice, meaning practicing on a handheld typewriter. Remove the upper and lower jaws, you know how they're bound together by springs. Separate them out, hold it with your hand. I don't care which angle you work at. Like benchtop does not mean it needs to be glued to the bench top. It just means hold it in your hands, spin it around however you need to look at, directly look at whatever it is that you're trying to work on. But if you cannot do a good prep on a handheld typewriter, there is no way you can do it when the typewriter is mounted. There's just no way. So make sure that you spend some time practicing benchtop before going into mounted, just so that you know for yourself that you can actually do this preparation well. And then when you go mounted, you're trying to recreate that, versus if you try to do everything mounted from the beginning, which a lot of people try to do, especially when they're short in time, because they're like, well, I'm going to be tested mounted, might as well practice mounted. I'll tell you, you're going to take longer to bring yourself up to par because you're trying to master so many skills at once. Take it a step at a time. You'll be able to go up the stairs faster at the end of the day. Bench practice. Bench top practice. Cannot stress this enough. So let's go through that worry list I came up with. Do I practice on all of the teeth? Well, yes and no. For cavities, you would do class 2s on molars, class 2s on upper premolars. Those would be your foundational things. And then a class 3 on anteriors and class 2s on lower premolars also come behind that. Anterior lowers, you can exclude it for all things. Yeah, but the thing is, remember the first thing I talked about was principles. A cavity is a cavity is a cavity, whichever tooth you do it on. So if you can do a really good cavity prep on a lower first molar, then you can do a decent cavity prep on an upper molar if you just apply the same principles that you did for the lower molar. This means that you need to know why you're doing everything you're doing for when you're doing the preparation. It's also a very important point. Like, have a strong foundation and really know why you're doing each thing. This is also going to be helpful for you in discerning whether the criteria is important for the prep to be clinically acceptable or ideal, because that is also a very important discernment to make, right? But if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, or like why this is listed as a criteria, then you're weak on your principles, and you won't know for sure why, whether like this part of the prep is important for clinical acceptability or it's just an ideal prep kind of feature. And then the different types of crowns also. Yes, there are 3 different types of crowns largely that you need to do on one tooth or the other. But the thing is, look, it's just the difference is how much margin we remove. So like how much actual reduction we do, which burr we use for doing that, and how much occlusal reduction we do. And then the shoulder comes with flaring. But we only work on 2 types of margins for the most part, chamfer and shoulder, yeah? And the occlusal reduction amount is just 0.5 millimeter difference. And that is like nothing in terms of making changes to, let's say like you were doing a 1.5 millimeter reduction for full gold and you want to go to 2 millimeters because it's a PFM, you just make your depth goes 0.5 millimeter deeper. And the rest, it doesn't affect anything you do. Yeah, just it takes a little bit longer to remove that, extra 0.5 millimeter occlusally, I guess. But that's the only difference. So I want you to think about things simply and don't overcomplicate things. So yeah, there are many different types of crowns, but again, a crown is a crown is a crown. Principles apply the same. So if you can do a good crown on a molar, you can do a decent crown on a premolar. You practice that, then you can do a good crown on a premolar. But it's never going to take as much time as it did to get good at other teeth than it did for like your first tooth Yeah, because, the principles carry over and you worked on your hand skills. What about knowing the exact guidelines for a certain schools? Don't all programs have different criteria for grading? This is a great question. And I'm going to have to say, well, yes, to some extent, but also no. So yes, if you can get your hands on, let's say, every single school's grading criteria, there will be differences, mostly minor. If you show a very well done preparation to different graders in different schools, they will agree that that prep is a very well done prep. Okay. We want to get you ready for a typical bench test, which is going to grade you according to the very classical ways of doing preparations, the old school classic ways of doing preparations. That's what we do. Okay. Most schools do not publish their guidelines. And that's okay. Like, that does not worry me at all, because a good prep is a good prep. Like, you just have to first make sure you're doing a clinically acceptable preparation, which there's no really debate on what that is. There's not really a debate on what that is, or at least very much of it. Not enough to affect, how we're approaching these preps. Let's just say that. And then we refine it with the ideal preparation features, let's say, and it will look great. So yeah, don't worry about the different criteria for grading. You just do a good classic prep, okay? Which burrs will be given to me on the test day? Most of the time, more than enough burrs. Sometimes not. But that list I gave you, that should cover you. There are so many guidelines. Is this for real? Yes and no, because as I said earlier, you want to make sure that first you're meeting the guidelines that are more important for clinical acceptability. And then you're trying to go for the other guidelines that are more important for ideal preparations. So yeah, in a way, it is real. Like, it's not just written there for whatever's sake. Like, they do mean it, but not every grading criteria is created equal, and you do need to focus on the more important things first, especially in the beginning of your practice. Later, after you nail that down, then you can work on the things that make ideal preps more. How good does my prep need to be to pass the bench test? The bench test is not something where you're like, okay, well, it's not like the boards where 75 pass, 74 no pass, right? It's not that. It's at the end of the day, bench test an interview, and they're going to take the applications and line you up, and then the top however many people they want, they're going to get accepted, and the rest are not. So it's relative. It's not absolute. So I can't tell you exactly how it is, but I do know that you do need to be pretty damn good to pass these days. That much I know for sure. So remember that staircase, the never-ending drawing of that staircase I showed you earlier? Just keep that in mind and just go as high as you possibly can, which is why you always want to give yourself plenty of practice time, because you don't want to be rushed. In the beginning, start from lower first molar cavity preps and upper first molar full gold crown preps. Lower first molar full gold crown preps is also fine, but just do a molar full gold and a lower molar cavity prep. Start from there and just kind of ignore the rest of the teeth for a little bit. For cavity preps, practice sequence. Start from lower molar, then go to upper molar, upper premolar, class 3, then lower premolar, unless you're going to Indiana and you know that you're going to be asked to lower premolar. If you know exactly what you're going to be asked, then ignore the rest and just practice what you're going to be asked. But other than Indiana, schools don't really ask for lower premolars. So this is a sequence that I want you to go through. And for each of these preps, go tabletop, then mounted. Okay, make sure you can do a decent prep tabletop, then go mounted. for lower molar first, then same thing with the upper molar. Go tabletop, do a decent prep, then go mounted, recreate. Okay, for crowns. Rule of thumb is molars first, chamfers first, which leaves us at upper and lower molar full gold crowns. And then from there, go to upper and lower molar PFMs. The only difference from going from a full gold crown to PFM for, molars is the fact that you're going to reduce 0.5 millimeter more occlusally, and you're going to put a shoulder on your buccal and then transition slowly to a chamfer interproximally. The lingual part is the same. So now you're getting shoulder practice in, chamfer practice in, and you're continuing to practice your occlusal reduction and whatnot. After you get that, then you can do central incisors or premolars. I don't really care which one you go for first, but yeah, PFMs and all ceramics only. Nobody does full gold crowns on any other tooth other than molars these days, or at least in terms of, testing purposes, because of aesthetics. So yeah, central incisor and premolar. The only difference between a PFM and an all ceramic is the lingual margin. PFM is going to have a chamfer versus all ceramic is going to have a shoulder all the way around, which also means that interproximally there's no transition, right? It's just a flat wide shoulder all the way around 360 for all ceramic. Minor difference because we already know how to do a shoulder margin. You just have to do more of that shoulder margin. That's it. And after you do those, now you're ready for practice for canines. Upper and lower canines, sequence doesn't really matter again. But canine prep is kind of like a hybrid between a central incisor prep and a premolar prep. And again, you're going to practice for PFMs and all ceramics. Yeah, so that's how I want you to go about practicing for crowns. But do not forget, especially when you're getting overwhelmed with all of the details and whatnot, the principles are the same regardless of the tooth. A crown is a crown is a crown. What does it really need? It must have taper. It must have enough room for material, so occlusal clearance. It must not have unsupported enamel or sharpnesses. That's a great place to start. It might sound boring and not as fancy and sexy as replicating the exact occlusal anatomy, but I tell you, that is what people focus on a lot in the beginning, and I always redirect their attention elsewhere, because replicating occlusal anatomy is not a feature that is important for clinical acceptableness. Think about it. People come with flat teeth, previously prepped crowns. There's no occlusal anatomy in those crowns. It's often flat. You do a root canal treatment, and then you do a buildup. Are you going to be recreating occlusal anatomy after you do a buildup on that core buildup material? I don't think so. Why? It's not going to provide you with any benefit, right? So you have to think of, this is why it's important to think of clinical acceptableness first. But anyway, principles are the same regardless of the tooth, same for crown, same for cavity preparations. If you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, try to do that part tabletop. Something is off there. So first, do a tabletop, make sure that you can actually do it if it's right in front of your eyes, and then go back and try to do it again mounted. This is a step that a lot of people don't do because a lot of people overlook tabletop practice, but don't. Even if your test is in 2 weeks, don't skip it. When your handpiece is running, if by any chance you are unsure that you are prepping or your handpiece is prepping exactly where you want it to prep, just let go of that foot pedal. Chances are, if you're not sure, chances are it's probably not, and you can't get that tooth structure back. I don't know why. This is also something that a lot of people struggle with because they kind of just wishfully hope that the correct place is being prepped. It's usually not. Just stop, double check, readjust everything, and go again. Don't try to work on every single part of a preparation at once. When you try to make everything a priority in your practice, you're really making nothing a priority in your practice. Have priorities. Choose 1 or 2 things at a time you're working on for each preparation. Try to get really good at that so it doesn't take as much effort to do those things, and then find another 1 or 2 things. But yeah, prioritize. And just try to do a little bit better this prep than you did the last. Okay, just a little bit better, just inching forward. As long as you're doing that, you're heading in the right direction. Sorry. Okay. Restorations. Whether it's amalgam or composite restorations, the objective is to restore the tooth's original shape with a simplified anatomy. You have to restore contacts and harmonize your restoration with the adjacent teeth. So I want you to focus more on these things. The contact with the adjacent tooth. I say this, I'm repeating myself intentionally because it's that important. I often see it either too tight or missing. It needs to be just right. It cannot be too tight, because if it is, the patient can't floss. They just can't. Also, where is it? Like, it must be present, and you want it slightly in the buccal third. Cable surface margins must be flush. No overhang. No overhang. I cannot emphasize this enough either, because this is also something that comes up over and over and over again. Most people will leave overhang and too much restorative material. So I would urge you to, when you're practicing for restorations, just so that you can get a really good sense on like how much material actually needs to be removed, intentionally over remove it. Like, make yourself open margins just to see how much you really needed to remove restorative material to actually open up that margin. It will give you a really good sense of where to stop next time. But if you keep, for every single, let's say, amalgam restoration, you're too afraid that you would open it up or whatever, that you always stop early, then you're never actually going to get that feel for exactly where to stop. And too many times I see overhang. Also, high restorations, amalgam and composite, both. High restorations, super common. It's in the same lines of not removing enough excess material. Remove, remove, remove. Just try over removing just to get the hang of it. And also, please make sure your marginal ridge height is the same as the adjacent tooth. And please focus less on carving out occlusal anatomy. You know what I see so many times is a very high restoration with occlusal grooves carved out with something really sharp. That is not occlusal anatomy. What good is that doing us, right? We need grooves and cusps in place so that the patient can function. Chewing happens, lateral motion of the lower jaw, things like that. It's not about just carving out the shapes of the grooves. Occlusal anatomy is an area, focusing too much on it is, again, something that many people make a mistake on. So now you know what to focus on instead. Spend 80-90% of your time working on preps, though, and not restorations. Restorations, you can actually improve them fairly quickly, faster than you can preparations, okay? Preparations really, they do take effort. So you wanna obviously make the most out of your practice time. I want you to get started now, and I don't care if you have a bench test scheduled or not. Get started now. Nobody has ever regretted or complained that they practiced too much. But I've had every single year so many people regret not having started earlier. I know it just kind of feels like a distant future if you don't have a tangible bench test scheduled like right now. I know it feels like a very distant future. You're not even sure if you're going to get a bench test, and you just don't feel like going for it often. But please remember that never-ending staircase picture I showed you. And if you do get that invite, the people that you'll be taking your test with likely, or at least enough number of people started earlier, because enough number of people had an interview elsewhere before. So they're not starting from scratch. So especially if you haven't started your practice like at all, don't wait. It takes longer than a few days to get ready. And again, you will not regret starting early, but you will regret starting late. Like, just imagine you got a call and the interview is in like 2 to 3 weeks. What are you going to do? You are going to panic and deeply regret not having started early, but it will not happen the other way around. Accurate feedback for your work is exceptionally important, because you need to know, based on what you've done, what to do differently next time. Based on what you've done, what are the important mistakes you should focus on at your current stage, and what you can not think about too much right now, because again, I talked about having priorities and knowing what to focus on, right? So accurate feedback is very important. This is very personalized. It is very easy to just practice over and over and over again and not have it go anywhere. And you're going to waste a lot of time and effort and a lot of teeth. Teeth are so easy to blow through. Let me tell you, they're like $2 each. And it takes a split second to ruin the entire prep. And we have a program called Bench Test Mastery, which includes personalized feedbacks for an entire year. And I will talk more about this in a minute later. But for now, I actually first want to jump over and see how everybody's doing in the chat room. So let's see. So there are a few questions there. And if you have any other questions, type it in right now. Let me get to those. I want to talk to you about Bench Test Mastery before we get to those, though. So, Bench Test Mastery. This is a completely online program that will teach you how to do preparations, restorations, all the things that you need to know for your bench test. It's important to know what mistakes are commonly made, again, amongst candidates, because you will very likely make them as well. So a lot of the Bench Test Mastery modules, I have talked about commonly made mistakes as we go along, so that you know what to particularly pay attention to so that you don't make those. The demonstration videos are shot from 2 angles at once so that you can see. It's kind of like our effort to turn something 3D, like when you just shoot it from one direction, it turns into a 2D. We'll bring it closer to another 3-dimensional experience again, so that you have some depth perception as well while you're watching. It also does include RPD designing and patient case studies, and it includes feedbacks for an entire year. So for a whole year, you can send me your work and I will review it. I'll make it into a video. So basically what happens is you send me photos, you tell me which tooth it is, and also you share with me any questions you have and what you're struggling with. And I pull that up on my computer. I use my mouse as a pointer and I point, at different parts of the preparation. I bring your attention to just your prep. I critique it, and more importantly, I tell you how to improve. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Anyway, so it includes feedbacks for a whole year, and you can keep access of the course until you get accepted, even if it's not this year. Obviously, I'm going to work with you to try and get you in this year, but even if it's not this year, you keep access. And this is actually one thing that prompts a lot of people to join before they even have a interview call, which I highly recommend. Highly, highly, highly recommend. It has 32 modules in total overall. And I'm just showing you a few of them here. Hand cutting instruments, I'm highlighting because most of us, or pretty much all of us, when you're practicing for your bench test, is the first time you're getting in touch with hand cutting instruments. It's like your first experience with them. They are amazing if used correctly. They can do a lot of damage if used incorrectly, and you must know how to use them. You cannot do a good contact opening for cavity preparations without hand cutting instruments. Operator patient positioning, covered. Class 2 preparations and different teeth. Class 3 preparations. It has different burrs, and like it has a demo video just showing you different burrs you need for crown preps and cavity preps, your setup, things like that. It does include partial veneer crowns, even though you probably don't need it. It does also include an MOD Gold online preparation, which onlays are asked at USC if you need it. Tufelmeyer matrix band tutorial is another big part, because most schools, this is what you're going to be using. You do not use the clear strip, mylar strip for the posterior cavity preparation restorations. And then amalgam and composite restorations, obviously, and RPDs, wax, and case studies. So feedbacks, this is such an integral part of bench test mastery. What you need to do is take photos of your work, and we have a guide for that, because I do need to be able to see specific things to be able to give you a well-rounded feedback. If I don't have the photos or views of pictures that I need, then I can't give you feedback on your entirety of your work. I can only give you a slither of that. So what you'll do is, once you join, you'll have access to our member site, and inside our member site, there is an area called feedback submissions area. You go there, upload your photos, and ask me any questions you have in the notes area. And then what I do is I pull up your photos, record a feedback video while I talk into a mic, and I use a mouse to point. And I focus on how to improve your prep, what to focus on, rather than just pointing out mistakes. See, pointing out mistakes is something that anybody can do. You can do it. You can find guidelines online and grade your own work. But that's not the point. If you're making the same mistakes over and over again, like, why are you making it? How do you improve? And how do I not make that again? That is the focus of feedbacks. And you're going to get an email when it's ready for you to view. Interview mastery. See, right now, because you are at this workshop live, we have a special prepared. If you join Bench Test Mastery, we will include our basic course of interview mastery for free. Inside the interview mastery course, you can learn the truth about how interviews really work. And seriously, it's not what you think it is, okay? You learn about strategies to respond to commonly asked interview questions. Super important that you know, because commonly asked interview questions, okay, they're common, right? But how do you actually tackle them? They're common because they want to know the answer. They're important because they actually care about those answers, and you better strategize how to answer for them. They're not just making sure that you're a normal person, or you have 5 fingers and 5 toes. That is not the point of the interview. Yeah. Okay. You also learn how to handle difficult interviewer personalities while you remain confident. This can really throw you off, by the way, if you have a really flat-faced interviewer. And you don't want that to happen. You practiced so hard for everything, and then this one cranky interviewer cannot ruin your experience, right? Also, how to differentiate yourself from other candidates and stand out. Also important. If you're just another one of those candidates that are sitting over there, then how are they going to remember you, and why would they pick you when they're only picking a few? There is a section for personalized strategizing called How Do I Respond? And how this works is if you have any situation that you're wondering, like, okay, well, let's just say hypothetically, you have like 2 years gap in your resume, something like you did nothing. And you are wondering how to talk about that if it comes up in an interview. You can put in a message in that section of the member site of the course and just give your background information, like as much as possible, because like you can't just say like, okay, how do I respond to this, because it's such a vague, like, we don't know about your background, we don't know where to drive the interviewer's attention instead of having them focus on the 2 years. You know what I mean? So tell us your story, tell us what happened, everything. Tell us more information than you think we need. Then you're going to get a personalized response for your particular situation in terms of how to handle this question for you. So any weak points, and people have weak spots in their backgrounds, right? Is it the lack of research? Is it the low GPA? Is it a failed board attempt? Something that just doesn't make you look quite as ideal, as it would have been if you didn't have that. You can always talk to us about how to strategize that through the How Do I Respond section. And you can add on sessions as you see fit if you want to. So there is a pre-mock interview strategy session. These last for an hour, and it's to give you personalized guidance to get you prepared for your mock interview. It's a recent addition we added. We didn't have this before. We used to just have, like candidates go straight to a mock interview. And we realized as we were doing that a lot of the interview questions were not being answered as well as they could have been answered if we had a conversation with you beforehand about your situation, about how to talk about your situation. So we added this, and we saw a significant increase in the performance of mock interviews. So it stays. So if you're going to do a mock interview, I would highly recommend that you do a pre-mock interview as well. This is fully recorded for you so that you can review it later too. Then there is a 2-hour-long mock interview plus feedback session that you can also have. It is a full practice interview, and it covers all of the commonly asked interview questions in the session. And at the end of that interview directly follows a coaching session, so that during that coaching session, you can discuss each question and how to improve your answers, because you might have said something and your interviewer is probably taking notes about, the good, but more importantly, where it wasn't as good. And then during the feedback session, your interviewer will bring it up to you and be like, hey, you said this, and I know this is not what you intended, but you didn't sound that confident, or maybe you sounded arrogant, or maybe you sounded pessimistic, or, like things that you just don't, traits that you don't want to display in front of the interviewer. We'll discuss how to improve your answers. This is also fully recorded for you to review. Inside Interview Mastery, the modules, welcome. And the interview fundamentals, this is where it really starts. The foundations of interviews, what is it? There's a lot of misconception about interviewing amongst the international dentist community, that it is not that important, that they just want to make sure that you can actually like speak and like you're a normal human being, whatever. It is not. They would not set aside so many faculty members and time, so much time, if that was all there was. They would just put you in a group setting and just chat with you. We're all like together, right? Like schools are paying these faculty members to do all of this because it's important to them. Okay, so you want to know the fundamentals of interviewing. Confidence, super important. You want to be just right. You don't want to be overconfident, like arrogant looking. You also do not want to come across underconfident. US culture, you are interviewing in an American school. There are some things that you should know about it. Even if you lived here for a while, this is US academic culture, okay? You might be getting along fine with friends or whatnot. Academic, it can be a different story. So you want to know about the parts of the culture that's important for your interview as it relates to it. And also, how do you make yourself differentiated, like stand out from the rest of the people who on resume might look very similar to you? Yeah, like on a piece of paper, because that's how they first got to know you as a candidate, right? Just several pieces of papers. So when you actually start interviewing, you want to be memorable and have you stand out. So how do you do that? And then there's a section called How Should I Respond, which I explained earlier. I think I already went through this, but the coaching schedule, right. So the pre-mock session, try to get it in 3 weeks before your interview if you do opt for this, okay? You're gonna get enough time and guidance to get you prepared for the mock interview. And the mock interview, hopefully we can get it in 2 weeks before. Everything is fully recorded again. So in a nutshell, you are going to be fully ready for your upcoming interview and your bench test. And if you join Bench Test Mastery today, you're going to get the Interview Mastery Basic, so the course of it, for free, included. And I think this is actually your first time running a special like that. So I would highly recommend you check it out, even if you don't have an interview coming up right now. It is, because our courses, you keep access until you get accepted, which is, for the comprehensive course, and you interact with us a lot. So it's actually very different from any other course out there in our community. Okay, so let's look through some questions that are here. Will the school provide low-speed handpiece during the interview? Great question, and it depends on the school. And because of this, I recommend not relying on it, okay? Like a slow-speed handpiece spins so slow that if you are lucky enough that they, first of all, provide you with a slow-speed handpiece, second of all, that slow-speed handpiece is usable, because to do that, they basically have to provide you with a way to use your usual friction grip burrs with that slow speed handpiece, right? The slow speed handpiece, the typical head takes latch type burrs, not friction grip burrs. So sometimes you'll find schools that give you a slow speed handpiece because it's a part of the basic setup, but you'll only get latch type burrs with like round burrs, which are like not important because we're not actually removing caries, you know? So if you're lucky enough to actually get a slow speed handpiece that is usable, so either they provide you with a head that takes friction grip handpieces, or they provide you with some kind of converter so that you can use your friction grip handpieces in the head, then I am not worried if you try it for the very first time during your test. Okay, but that whole thing about like friction grip versus latch type attachment is another reason why kind of trying to practice with a slow speed handpiece at home can be a little bit of a pain. So, but not all schools give it to you. So just, I'd say practice without it. If you get it during your bench test, then fantastic. It cuts so slow that you can try it for the first time that day and you should be fine. What preps are asked at Indiana? So I don't know what they're going to ask this year, obviously. And I don't know, you probably are going to be getting a some kind of information packet after they have received your interviewing fee. But traditionally, it has been a bridge preparation and a lower premolar cavity preparation. I am going to buy a typodont. How many replacement teeth approximately do I need to get initially? And do we need to get 2 types of typodonts? Okay, let's talk about the typodont type first. I don't know if you have a interview coming up right now. If you do, just buy the type of typodont that you're going to be asked, that the school uses. If you don't, it's about a 50-50 split, between schools that use Columbia and Kilgore. But Columbia typodonts are a little bit more difficult to work with, which is why I recommend that you start with a Columbia typodont. And if you are called for a school that uses Kilgore, buy it later. But it's okay if you only have, let's say, 10 days to practice with a Kilgore, but transitioning from Columbia to Kilgore is easier and faster than transitioning from Kilgore to Columbia. So get Columbia if you're not sure. And the replacement teeth, that is a good question, and it's a very difficult one to answer because some people will do one prep for 2.5 hours. Some people will ruin it in 15 minutes and need a new tooth. So just for the very first shipment, get 10 each of all of the major teeth. Okay, it could sound like a lot, but you'll go through it and you'll get a hang of how much you will need personally. And yeah. And don't forget also maybe 2 each of adjacent teeth as well, because they are going to get nicked when you start out. And when it gets nicked enough, you're obviously not you don't need to replace the nicked adjacent tooth for a small nick, but when it becomes enough, it is going to affect your cavity preparation opening. So there is a point in time where you do need to get it new. And also, if it's already nicked, then you don't know if you're nicking anymore while you're practicing, which is also not great, right? How long do I take for response? How long you take for response me back for the preparation? So I'm gonna guess that you mean for feedbacks, right? Typically a couple of days, sometimes the next day, sometimes same day, somewhere along that range. So you send me your work and I record the feedback. You'll get an email when it's done. And I do want to add on to this that the amount of feedback that I will be giving you in a single video is much more than you can improve within just 2 or 3 days. Does this make sense? It's going to have a lot of things in it. So practice with that. Really try to dig in and practice with that. Okay, do you have any suggestions for dental schools offering hands-on bench prep courses? I don't know. I know that there are schools offering this. I'll tell you what I have seen from clients coming our way, and many come after going to hands-on bench test courses. The school ones especially are rather short in duration most of the time, and it is just not enough time. It's just not enough time. There's so much to practice. How are they going to get you good in cavities and crowns in 3 days, 5 days? They can't. They'll get you better than where you were before, sure. So that's the only thing I really have to say about it. But I would say go for the longer duration one so that you get more time there. That actually would be something that I suggest highly of. Yeah. And if you can read reviews, look for one that I don't know, has more hands-on time. It is difficult to doing live courses with a limited time because there is a balance that needs to be met in terms of explanation time and prep time. And the explanation time is something that people often don't want to hear. Yet it is very important. And then they realized that it was important later while they're actually doing like hands-on time. Um, anyway, so then they're like, okay, this is why this was explained earlier, but I wasn't paying that much attention, or I kind of forgot, which is why I really like our online course, because you can always go back and go listen to whatever you need to. And one more thing just about dental schools offering bench test courses or prep courses. Many people go because with like a hope, or maybe a friend said so, that it will increase your chances in getting accepted into that particular school. Um, and I have seen many, 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 many people get disappointed because it did not work out for them. So just make sure that like you're going for the right reason if you are. Okay, there are various types of compressors and dental turbine units. Doesn't matter which one I get. I'm worried I am not going to be able to connect them together. Okay, in terms of the connection, so Sonia, I would recommend shoot us an email at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com and ask for the list, our bench test startup, bench test, what's it called? Like a home lab setup starter kit list or something like that. Anyway, if you just say something like that, we'll know what we're talking about. There, we explain what it is that you need, but the turbine unit and the compressor units, like in terms of the connection, they'll work the same. So you do want to make sure that you're getting a big enough compressor. So I showed you the California air compressor earlier. I don't know how many gallons it is, but anything smaller than that, shoot us an email with this question. I'll be happy to get back to you. But if it's too small, like as you're practicing, you'll run out of air, and the high-speed handpiece will stop working, and you'll have to wait until the compressor compresses enough air to send it to you. So that's really annoying. So you want to make sure that you get a compressor, first of all, large enough to handle a high-speed handpiece kind of continuously running, although you're not going to be continuously running it. One more thing with a compressor, by the way, get something that says that it is silent. You will be surprised at how loud the silent compressors are. And if you don't get the silent one, just don't even attempt it. Like, it's really, really, really loud, okay? So get a silent one and get one large enough. The turbine units, they look a little different from one another, sure, but they all come from like the same couple of factories in China. It doesn't matter whether the casing is plastic or whatever. The end of a turbine unit that you're going to connect to the compressor actually just is a plastic hose. You're going to have to go to like a Lowe's or Home Depot and get the part that connects that way, and like it screws onto the compressor. It's a standard part. Which is explained inside the guide. Anyway, so yeah, in terms of connection, it does not matter which ones you get. That was the actual question, yeah. Okay, which type of models do we exactly need? So yeah, both Columbia and Kilgore's have soft and hard gingivas, and models with or without third molars. Get soft or hard gingiva matters less, but get the ones with the third molars. So for Columbia, it is, oh, I cannot remember the model name exactly. 860, yeah. So in Columbia, 860, and Kilgore, it's 200. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions before we finish up, now is the time to ask. And also, if you are interested in getting the course, feel free to do that also. And if you have any questions about it, or you want to hop on a quick call with me, shoot us an email. If you want to hop on a quick call with me about the course, shoot us an email at mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. I just put it in the chat box, and let us know. I heard some schools have computer assessment for our bench test. What are the actual findings the school expect in our preparation. I'm guessing that you're talking about the simulation. So this simulation model is, let me get some water first. So some schools have a simulation lab where they have a gigantic upper torso, everything mannequin, and attached to that are like computer screens. And it's a big unit, it's fancy, and it senses your work, it senses what you're doing, it senses your posture, things like that. So, but because they usually only have one or two of these, they don't have the time to have you take your entire bench test on that model, nor do they have the time to even have you do a whole lot on that model. So usually what it is they'll ask you to do a class 1 preparation. Lower molar class 1 preparation is most often what it is. And if your posture is slouched, it will say so, like the computer will say out loud, or it will give some warning signs. On the top part of the computer screen, there'll be a shape of what it is that they're looking for in terms of the outline. And as you do your prep, it will either have a separate screen or it will overlap on top of it how you are prepping. So it gives kind of instantaneous feedback in terms of how you're doing it. But I mean, what the schools expect to see are the same, right? They will want you to see you with like good posture because this assesses that. They want to see you be able to follow guides that are given, like that shape that is there. They want to see you do that. Some schools don't even ask for a prep. They'll ask just for a square to be cut out. Remember earlier I said how important it is to have steady hands? When you have steady hands, you can do with your hands what you want it to do. This is really like, if you get to that point, this kind of assessment is, of course, it's still nervous. You'll still be nervous because it's your first time sitting on a simulation mannequin like that, but you'll be able to do it. Do it because like you won't be like nicking other areas that you didn't mean to nick, or like the unexpected things won't happen or will happen a lot less. Okay, if we can't arrange a compressor, is it okay to work on type 1 onset at dental clinic? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wherever works for you to practice is great. Yeah. Okay, you guys, I think that was the end for the questions. So yeah, hopefully, I hope that I was able to provide you with value and you had a good time chatting with me today. I had a good time talking to you. I haven't done a live session like this in a while, so it was fun. And yeah, so click on that green button to the left of the chat room to take a look at the Bench Test Mastery special. It will only be available until tomorrow night. So if you have a bench test coming up or you are expecting a call this year, not a bad time to get it. Okay, so that is all. Thank you so much for your time today, and I will see you next time. And whether I work with you or not, I wish you the best of luck with your preparation and in this cycle. All right, bye now.